Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. I'm pleased to be joined by Anton Ferdinand today. Anton, let's kick it off. Icebreaker. You've got an away game with West Ham. You can room share with anybody you've played with in a West Ham shirt over your career. Who are you choosing and why?
I'd have to go with my actual roomie, Marlon Harewood. He was my roomie. I had Jermaine Defoe when I first got into the first team. Started travelling with the first team. But I'd have to go with my long-term roomie, which was Marlon Harewood.
How come? What's the reason?
We just got on. I think sure people would have seen me and him going at it in the games. You know, we were vocal towards each other in games, but once the whistle stopped, no matter what was said between us on the pitch, it was all love again, and you know, he's like a big brother to me. So I spent most of my time with Marlon in terms of room sharing than anyone else. So I'd have to say Marlon Harewood.
Did you get to choose when you back then? Did you get to choose who you roomed with, or did someone else select your roommate for you?
It was selected for us, but then you can change if you want to.
Okay.
If someone's got bad sleeping habits or like for me personally, if we would have lost or I would have played rubbish in the game when the first time I roomed with Marlon, I would never have roomed with him again. You know, but it was a successful one, and as I said, we went on to room for a very, very long time.
Right, let's talk about your career at West Ham then. Let's go back to the very, very start when you got into the academy. How did that come about?
I was 9 years old, playing for my local team in Peckham called Athenley, and also playing for my district. And through playing for my district, a guy by the name of Dave Goodwin, who found me and Rio, who was Rio's district manager, my district manager. He scouted us. He was a scout for West Ham. He was one of Tony Carr's and Jimmy Hampson's scouts for the southeast of London. And he asked me if I wanted to go down to West Ham, and I was, of course, I said yes, I'd love to. Started off in the Centre of Excellence in Beckenham, over in southeast London, and there was the likes of myself, Ben Watson, Kieran Richardson, all in that Centre of Excellence. And me and Kieran after that got fast tracked. When we turned about 10, 11, we got when we turned about 11, we got fast tracked from there to Chadwell Heath. You only really started playing games back then for West Ham at under 12s, under 13s. And under 11s, me and Kieran got fast tracked, and we were playing 1-2 years above ourselves. And that was really the start of my journey at West Ham.
Did you always know you'd make it, or were you ever close to getting released at any point as a youngster?
It was always the dream, you know, it was to make it. I always believed in myself from a very, very young age. And I was always under a lot of pressure, which I'm sure we'll get into a bit later. But I always believed, I always thought I was going to make it. Were there times where I thought, wow, this ain't going to happen? Yeah, 100%. That's what happens in a footballing career. From the age of now is 7, you get taken into an academy. Your pathway to the first team, or even just to get into an academy in terms of getting to a stage where you're signing a scholarship, it's like that. You know, it's up and down. It's how you deal with it. It's how your parents deal with it, which is key. And I didn't think I was going to get a YTS, a scholarship. It was called a YTS when I was younger, but a scholarship in today's terms. I didn't think I was going to get it. And there was a time where I said to my dad, I don't really want to play football anymore, Dad, because I didn't think I was going to get it. And the best bit of advice he probably gave me was, because I wanted to do singing, I was like, I'll do singing. I don't want to do football. I'm just going to do singing. And the best bit of advice he gave me was, you can do singing after football, but you can't do football after singing. So let's see what happens. Have a go at football. If it don't work, then you can move on to singing. And I listened to him, and the rest is history.
Hang on, singing?
Yeah.
Right, you're going to have to expand on this. What kind of music in that? I mean, you must have felt you were all right if you felt that's a career. You know, you're at the time of Premier League sort of youth level. You're playing football, and you're debating giving that up to go pursue singing. So, what kind of music in that were you bashing out tunes to?
I thought I was Craig David back in the day, didn't I? I like say Craig David, Usher, Chris Brown, them type of tunes. I fancy myself as a singer. I wasn't vocal about it when I was younger, but I would muck about and be in the changing room, and I'd throw a little tune out, or I'd sing. And I think Jermaine Defoe said on Sky Sports on Soccer M one time. They asked him who's the best singer you've heard in football, and he said me. He was like, you know what, Anton can sing. And then flipping, he said, but only covers though. He ain't got his own voice. He can only do covers. I was thinking, you cheeky little fucker. But yeah, that's what it was.
Marlon got a bonus then sharing with you then, didn't he? Got like his own like personal singer in the room with you every week.
As I said, I weren't out there singing. I wasn't thingy, but I would muck about. I'd be in the dressing room. I'd be in the treatment room, and it depends. If music came on, I would just sing along with it. Like if I liked the tune, and that's all it was. But at home, in my house, I would take it serious.
Let's get back to the football. I love that story though, but let's get back to the football. West Ham obviously got relegated, and that summer is when you started to get into the first team. I mean, there's winners and losers in every situation in football. Did you feel you massively benefited from West Ham getting relegated, or did it simply just speed up your progress, if you like?
Yeah, I definitely benefited from it. As a fan, I was devastated, of course. I had been on pre-season the year before. I had travelled with the first team. I didn't really play. I just travelled and trained with the first team. I was fast-tracked, to be fair. From 4 months of leaving school, I was training with the first team and training with the reserves. You know, and that took a lot of hard work to get that opportunity. You know, and people will tell you within the club, I was somebody who they used to have to drag off the training pitch. I was always trying to work on something that I was rubbish at to try and improve, because I had identified that off the basis of getting a YTS, and the reason why I got the YTS and not the other boy was because West Ham wanted to see me come out of a growth spurt that I was going through. And the reason why they picked me is because they had watched Rio come through a growth spurt. And they'd saw what happened with him and how well he had done. So they thought it was the right thing for them to see me come out of a growth spurt. And if they had anything half as decent as Rio, then they was on to a winner. That's the way they looked at it. But off the basis of that, I identified and realised that at some point I was going to get an opportunity. You know, whether that be first, it'll be the reserves. Then if I do well with the reserves, I'd then get an opportunity to train with the first team. Then I'd get an opportunity to play with the first team if I continued to progress. So I knew that opportunity was going to come based on the fact that, one, I knew I was a good player, and two, they wanted to see what I was like, because I was Rio's brother, and see how I would progress. But I also understood that Rio weren't going to be on the pitch with me, and I had to do it myself. So I worked so hard that when the opportunity came, I was ready for it. You know, and people that worked around me and worked with me as a youngster would tell you I was probably one of the hardest working kids at the training ground and within the football club, because I didn't want to let anybody down. And that's what it was. And West Ham getting relegated, as a fan, it hurt me. But evidently it sped up my progress and sped up my pathway into the first team, and I made my debut the first game of the season in a championship the following year.
Before we get on to that debut, just what's your thoughts as a former footballer, I guess? When you speak about that growth spurt, I heard you and Rio discuss this before, and you think it's possibly a reason why a lot of kids get kicked to the wayside, essentially, that they're really good, they are going to make it, they grow, they struggle, and they struggle at, I guess, the pivotal time when clubs are making a decision whether to retain them or dismiss them, and therefore they probably get released when they shouldn't be. Do you think, as a former player, that actually that is the reason why a lot of players don't make it, that they go through a growth spurt and academies are just a little bit impatient with them and dismiss them?
Yeah, it can be. And not just that. When a player goes through a growth spurt, they lose a lot of confidence, because what they were doing prior to having a growth spurt, they were on fire. And all of a sudden, and the only way to really convey the message so people can get an understanding of what I mean by that, and why a growth spurt is so detrimental, is if you look at a golfer and you give a golfer's played with a certain measurement of clubs that are measured to him or her, then all of a sudden you give that golfer a golf club which is maybe a little bit longer or a little bit shorter, they're going to struggle to hit. They might hit the ball, but in terms of accuracy and in terms of power, they're going to be so far away from what they really know. And it's the same as a footballer. You know, the minute you're used to, you get used to your leg length and your body length, and when you go to kick a ball, everything's in sync. The minute that it gets longer, all of a sudden you're now scuffing the floor. You're not hitting the ball as clean, and a lot of players lose confidence. So it's not only the fact that they go through the growth spurt and they don't look the same player that they was probably the year before, and clubs are patient with it. Sometimes it's identifying and making sure that the player gets the right nurturing, the right mentoring, I'd say, to make them understand that it will come back. You know, and making sure that that player understands and knows that there is still a player in there, and we're looking forward to seeing that player come once your growth spurt is finished.
I'll confess, I never even considered it until I heard you discussing it before. And then when I heard it, I thought, well, it makes sense. You know, it just makes sense. You can't really argue against it. But it certainly changed my way of thinking a little bit when I heard you discussing it about your personal experiences as well. And I thought, oh, okay, it's something you don't really consider as a football fan either. The player's almost just simplify. The player's good enough, or the player's not good enough, and you tend to not really consider the factors.
There's so many factors that go into it. If Peter Braybook, Tony Carr hadn't seen Rio go through it and see Rio become what he become, I wouldn't be sitting here having this conversation with you as a former player of West Ham United. I don't think that would have been happening, because I think they would have taken the other boy before me.
Sad that in a way, but ruthless football, I guess, is the nature of football.
Yeah.
Right then, your debut, Preston North End. What do you remember about that? Talk me through your day, the game, your feelings, everything.
Cool. It was one of the hottest days that I've ever played football in, if I'm honest. It was a bit of a shambles getting up there. We had travelled up there. There was no aircon on the bus. We'd picked Neil Mellor up on the way. We'd done all our prep for the game and stuff. And then next thing you know, Neil Mellor's on the bus. We picked him up on the M6 at a service station. I had loads of time to think, because I knew I was playing, which probably weren't the best thing. Because obviously not just a player and realising my dream that I'm going to make my debut as a professional footballer, but also being a West Ham fan, you know, and having to go and represent the club and represent the fans at the highest level was that we was playing at the time, which was the Championship. And I had so much time to think about it. Then adding to that, it being live on Sky, Rio being in the stands there waiting to watch his younger brother make his debut. And it couldn't have started any worse. I made a mistake for the goal. I tried to be casual. And one thing why I was like that is because I was trying to show the West Ham fans that I was like Rio. I could be composed, you know, and I was all lackadaisical and calm and collective. And I let the ball come across me from across, but I didn't check my shoulders, and the left winger come and tap the ball in. You know, and it was at the end where the West Ham fans were, and I remember it clearly, hearing West Ham fans shout, "Who's this? This ain't no fucking Ferdinand. Who is it? He's shit. He shouldn't have the name Ferdinand." But I could hear it all. And David James weren't too kind with his words, which he still to this day denies, but that's something I'll never forget. His words were along the lines of, "You shouldn't even fucking be here." and that was coming from my goalkeeper. But I was a young man who was resilient, and everything that I'd learned up until that point in terms of my character and growing up in a place like Peckham, everything that was taught to me by the coaches at West Ham, and my personal pride, not to let my family down and not to let the club down, and not to let my friends who essentially, some of them should have been playing and I shouldn't have because they were better than me as kids, not letting them down. And I remember walking to my position, looking at the sky and going like, Anton, what are you going to do, man? This is sink or swim time. If you sink, that could be your career done. But you didn't work this hard to do that. So I suggest you start swimming. And lo and behold, I never put a foot wrong the rest of the game. We won the game 2-1. And that was the start of my West Ham career.
You had Roder as manager at this point. What was he like as a gaffer?
He was exceptional for me. I think he saw me as a project. Joe Cole's spoken about it before when I've done interviews with Joe Cole and done Joe Cole's podcast and stuff. And when I've spoken about the pressure that I felt coming into the first team environment, because a lot of the players that I was now training with at 17 had all played with Rio. So they were expecting Rio to come into the training session. And Joe Cole said to me, like, it wasn't even like that. We knew you was a good player because of the way Glenn Roeder spoke about you, and he said, I think Glenn Roeder saw you as a project. And I never looked at it like that. But I was, Glenn Roeder, for people who don't know who had seen him as a player, he was someone who was calm on the ball, played centre back, but was calm on the ball and had a step over in him, would like to come out and pass the ball. And that was the type of centre back that I was. My best attributes were with the football, So he saw me as a project, and I remember him always saying to me, "The reason why you're training with us is because of the first impressions that you left on me in a youth team game." And I was like, "What?" He went, "Anton, always remember people's first impressions within football are most important. Whether it's the fans, whether it's your teammates, whether it's the dinner lady, whether it's the tea lady, whether it's the kit man. The first impressions in football are massively, massively, massively important." And I took that throughout my whole career. Everywhere I went, I made sure I conducted myself, whether I was meeting people for the first time, whether I was meeting them for the 100th time. No one could ever say, "Oh, Anton's changed" or "Anton's different." I'd always taken that advice. And I got it from somebody who, as a manager, didn't have a great time at West Ham, but as a person and as a coach, he was phenomenal, and I wouldn't be sitting here speaking to you as a former player of West Ham if it wasn't for the likes of Glenn Roeder.
Do you know all that stuff that was sort of like he's only here because of Rio kind of thing? We'll get on to your brother later on, but obviously you're breaking into the first team now and it's sort of judgment time, if you like. Was there any senior players at the team tried to shield you from that? Obviously not David James, but was any of the first team players, I don't know, put their arm around you and said, "Anton, forget all that. You're Anton Ferdinand. You're not Rio's brother. You're Anton Ferdinand. Forget all that." Was there anyone that sort of stepped up and nurtured you personally?
Yeah, my first year when I came in, I was just training. I was traveling. My first time I travelled was against Tottenham at White Hart Lane, which was massive for me because I'm a West Ham fan. I understand how big that game is, And I remember walking in for pre-match at Upton Park, and I remember I'm 17 at the time. I've just started training with the first team. I'm training well. I felt comfortable in the environment, but I didn't have a boot boy. I was still my own boot boy. I had my own boots. So I brought my boots with me in an old school boot bag. And I remember walking into the pre-match room and Trevor Sinclair, he just started giggling at me. And I was like, "What are you laughing at?" He went, "Why have you brought your boots?" And I went, "Just because I need them." And he went, "You ain't going to need them, bruv," and just started laughing, But then on the other hand, you had people like Joe Cole, Jermaine Defoe, Michael Carrick, who were all products of the youth team. And they were people that always gave me little carrots, gave me little nuggets, along with the manager, Glenn Roeder. Make sure you're watching what the first team players are doing, how they're preparing for games. You will find your own way of preparing, but you need to start understanding how serious preparation is. And this is why you're here. So make sure you're doing that. And that's what it was for me. I had players like that. And said I was a confident young man in terms of my own personal ability, you know, and I was brought up in an environment with my mum and my dad and my brother, with the thought process of whatever people say outside of our four walls of our flat in Peckham, we don't really care about. You know you're a good player. Us as a family know you're a good player, and that's all that matters. And I always had that armor on. That was like an armor for me that protected me mentally from hearing all of that stuff, and where I was able to, at times, shake it off and just get on with it.
Your first full season ended with us losing the playoff final this time round. How did you feel your first season went?
It was a hard one for me because I've just spoken about an armour. But there were times in that season where I didn't feel protected by Alan Pardew when he came in. And the reason that I was playing out of position, I was playing fullback. I came into the team as a fullback because it was the easiest place to put me as a young player because there's less responsibility. You know, if I lose the ball at centre back, odds are it's a goal. Whereas if I lose the ball in the fullback position, they're still going to get past the centre back. You know, and I understand why. And I was lucky and blessed enough that I could play other positions. But I'd actually played centre midfield, right midfield, left back, right back before I'd actually played centre back. And because I could hear the whispers from some parts of Upton Park where what have we got on our hands here? They're like expecting Rio, and they're not seeing Rio. They're not seeing anything close. They're seeing a player who works hard for the team, who wears his heart on his sleeve. But in terms of the quality, we're not seeing it all the time, and he's inconsistent. And that really, really played on me to the point where I was, if you ever speak to if you ever speak to Alan Pardew, I was in his office weekly, like, play me centre back. I'm better than who's playing. I'm better than Malcolm McCarr. I'm better than Andy Melville. I'm better than Christian Daly. Play me centre back. And that was no disrespect to them. I just had raw belief in myself, and not just that. I wanted the fans to see the real me, you know. And I felt like I was being judged unfairly because I was playing out of position. And the breakthrough really was when I got my call up for England under 21s, and in that time when I was training with England under 21s with the likes of James Milner, Michael Dawson, Callum Davenport, Stephen Taylor, and other centre backs that were playing in the Premier League at the time. I was playing in the Championship. In training, I was quite abrupt. When we were playing small-sided games, I would push Dawson out at fullback, and I'll say, "No, I'm playing centre back in here." But the reason why I was doing it is because I wanted to show Peter Taylor, the manager, I'm a centre back. Yeah, he's picked me because I'm playing fullback for West Ham, and he's looking at me as a fullback. But no, I'm a centre back. And it was 2 days before the game. He came to me, "Anton, why do you keep doing that?" And I went, "Because, yeah, I'll play anywhere for my country. I'll play anywhere for you as a manager." But I said, "But if you want to see the best Anton Ferdinand, you play him at centre back." And he went, "Okay, then no problem." He went, "Okay, you'll be playing centre back. You'll be making your debut, you'll be playing centre back for England on 21s." I said, "Okay, no problem." And because I had spoken every week in Alan Pardew's office saying, "I want to play centre back, I want to play centre back," I knew I was under pressure and I had to perform in that game because he'd be watching. And I played the game. We won 3-0. I played very, very well. So well that on the way home from Middlesbrough, because it was at the Riverside, on the way home from there, I was in the car with my little sister and my mum. And Alan Pardew rang me and he said, "I just want to say firstly, congratulations on making your debut for West Ham. For England under 21s at centre back. Anton, you was that good. I'm ringing you now. You're playing centre back on Saturday against Crewe Alexandra." And I was like, "Okay, it served its purpose. What I've done all this week has served its purpose for what meant so much to me, which was to play centre back for West Ham United and show the fans that I am a good player, you know, and I can be judged playing in my preferred position and the best version of myself." And that was the start of my career, really, at West Ham, where I started to feel comfortable. I started to feel like I could add value to the team and not be a liability, and then playing loads of games and at centre-back, and then all of a sudden playing full-back the last 3-4 games of the season, scoring the goal that helped us, my first goal for West Ham against Watford away, which helped us get into the playoffs because we were just outside the playoffs at the time. And then all of a sudden the playoffs games come and I'm on the bench. And I was like, what's going on here? Like, I've played the most important game to get us into the playoffs. Why am I not playing? Like, I know I'm good enough. Like, why am I not playing? And then being on the bench and then getting to the final and not being on the bench at all, I was 17th man, and that really, really hurt me. But it hurt me in a way where I went away in the summer and I worked harder than I ever have done. And then the next season I came back ready, and I came back with a mentality of, I'm going to make sure that this centre-back place is mine and mine only, and whoever, it's going to be who's playing with Anton. And that's what, and I want it to be my back line, you know, and I was able to do that quite early on in the season. And then when we fast forward to the business end of the season is when Elliot Ward came in, and we formed a formidable partnership. I think the last 13 games or 14 games of the season, we was unbeaten. You know, we played some tough teams away. We played Wigan away. We played Burnley away. They were tough games, and we came out on top. And me and Elliot Ward we built the foundations to allow our attacking players to go and do what they needed to do, and to then go from the heartache and the personal feeling that I had as a West Ham fan and the hurt that I had of someone who wasn't even involved in the playoff season the year before, to now go on and win it and play in that game. You know, it was unbelievable, and I'm sure people that remember that day will remember that I was on the pitch after the game for more than an hour celebrating with the fans, and it was that big of a deal for me as a West Ham fan. But that was the first time where I actually felt like a West Ham, I'd done something for the club, and I felt like an actual a West Ham first team player. That was the first time, the minute I had achieved something with the club and for the club, was the first time I was like, okay, yeah, I'm a West Ham player.
How did Pardew react when you were in his office every week? Did he just tell you to piss off, or what did he say roughly to you? Did he say, do it in training, then we'll talk? Or
yeah, he used to say, like, okay, he used to say, you're not training hard enough, and I'm thinking, come on, like that's a poor excuse. But he'd also say, like, I can't trust you at centre back. You ain't got enough experience. And I'll say, okay, well, send me on loan then. Let me go and get experience and let me come back. And he's going, yeah, but you play too many positions, Anton. You're normally first off the bench, so I need you on the bench. I need you in the squad. I'm like, well, that ain't helping me, you know. And we were going back and forth. And as I said, it took me to play for England at centre back before I played at centre back for West Ham, and that was just the way my journey went.
When you were talking there about the playoff semi-finals and the final where you weren't involved, and you threw out a hypothetical question, which was, what's going on here? Why am I on the bench? And then obviously, why am I not even in the squad? Did you ever get an answer to that question?
No, but as I sit here now, older and reflective on my career, I probably wasn't ready. You know, so it's a massive occasion. I'm a West Ham fan. I'm an emotional West Ham fan at that. You know, I wear my heart on my sleeve. And maybe I just wasn't ready. But it gave me the grounding to be able to go into the next year when we went into the final. I'd experienced all of the hype. I experienced it, so be it from not being on the bench, but I was in the squad and on the coach and went through all of it, that I was probably more well-versed on on how it looked walking into the stadium, how it felt walking out onto the pitch. I was probably more equipped the year after, and I had fire in my belly. I don't know if you remember, there was a lot of talk about David Nugent around the time he was on fire for Preston. And my personal motivation is that people are going to start talking about Anton after this game and not David Nugent, because I'm going to put him in my pocket, you know, and he ain't going to have a sniff. And that was my motivation, other than getting West Ham back into the Premier League, you know. So I had two big motivations, and luckily for me on the day, both of them came true.
Love that attitude. Right then, Pardew's manager, what was he like? I mean, you've already given us a couple of insights, but what's your overall thoughts on Pardew's manager?
I loved him. I mean, people have different things to say about him. People will say that he's chocolate, loves himself. That was what we called him chocolate. Because if he was one, he'd eat himself. That's what the boys called him. Not to his face, but between us. Obviously, we respect him as a manager. He had a good presence about him. But for the time that I had him, he was very, very good. For me, he was the best manager I had in terms of his attention to detail. Every training session throughout the week was geared up for how we was going to play on a Saturday. So, for instance, to give you a bit of context, if we was playing against Arsenal, we know Arsenal they only want to come through the middle of the pitch. A lot of their stuff, they don't go down the side and cross the ball. They come down the middle of the pitch. So we would do keep balls where we would have to send the ball wide and not let the ball come through the middle. Like you couldn't score through the middle of the pitch. You could only score wide. You know, so we'd have to, or you could only score through the middle of the pitch. You couldn't score wide. Yeah. So we'd have to show people wide to make sure that they couldn't come into the middle of the pitch. And everything was geared up to who we were playing against. But for me personally, at the age of 18, 19, I needed somebody who was going to treat me like an adult. And he definitely done that, you know. It's no secret that I was out quite a bit at 18, 19, 20. And he used to say to me, Anton, I know you're out. I know you've been out, whether it be for dinner, whether it be a nightclub. I know you've been out because people have told me. But the minute it starts to affect your football, the minute it starts to affect your performance on the pitch, I'm going to hurt you. I'm going to hit you and I'm going to hurt you because you're not going to play and you're going to get fined. And I needed someone like that because I think if someone was there saying to me, Anton, you're not doing this, you're not doing that, as a young teenager, you know, you're going to be looking at it going, well, you're not my dad. But he allowed me to make the decision. He made me think like it was my decision that I wasn't going to go out as much. Or if I did go out, if I did fall on my sword, I fall on my sword because of me. You know, and he managed me well, I'd say.
I know someone that's seen you the night before a game in a kebab shop somewhere. I can't remember where. He told me the story, right? And he said, flipping Anton in a kebab shop night before a game. I think he'd had a couple of drinks or whatever. He said, but the next day he said, we won and Anton was man in the match. He said, so not really harsh. He says, I'm going to go have a kebab.
I would never have had a drink. I would never have had a drink, like a proper drink before a game. That was never my thing. I'd never done that. The only time where I had a drink before a game and we was allowed a drink was before the playoff finals and before the FA Cup. Alan Pardew would allow us to have either a glass of red wine or a glass of white wine or a beer, just one with our evening meal. Other than that, I never touched a drink. I'd have an Indian or I'd have a kebab or whatever. Whereas if you said that in today's football, people were like, are you mad? How are you going to have energy in the game when you're eating a kebab? You need to load up on carbs, you need to do this, you need to do that. There's more nutrition in it now. But in terms of drinking and that, I wouldn't have had a drink before the game, but I ate rubbish.
Do you think the modern game's gone too far in that aspect? Because obviously some of the legends back then, from like way before your time as well, you know, they used to smoke and, you know, there's a story about how, like, you know, Frank McAvenny would turn up pissed for a game and go out there and be the best striker in the league that weekend and stuff. So do you think the modern game's gone too far, or do you think it's the right thing to do for football?
I think it's the right thing to do. We're seeing players play into their 40s, you know, so it must be the right thing that they're doing. They're taking care of their bodies more. And they're taking care of their minds, and I think it's benefiting football because we're seeing football played at a pace that we've never seen before, week in, week out, and we're seeing players having a longer career than just the average age of 35.
Right, let's talk about a couple of goals then. We're going to start with the obvious one, that one against Fulham. I mean, what's going through I'll be honest, right? I lived in Aberdeen at the time and I was at school. So I used to get one home game, one away game, and one other a season. My dad would take me, and then my brother would get the same. And I was lucky to be at that game. I think my brother went to a 0-0 that season, and so I think he was a bit pissed off that he turned up. So I turn up, but I get to see not one but two screamers in that match, but one being yours. I mean, did you mean it? Did you know I'm going to execute this volley, or did you thought I'm just going to have it and see what happens?
Yeah, I meant to volley it. I meant to connect with the ball. The technique and everything was something that I practiced. You know, if you speak to the lads, if we was doing shooting practice, I'd always want volleys. I was rubbish at shooting at goal. If the ball's on the floor and rolling it across me, I wasn't as good at that. But the minute the ball went into a volley, I was like, okay, it's my time now. Come on, who wants a bet? Or I'll score more goals than you on the volley. I was like that. I like volley. I like the look of a volley, the technique, you know, and I loved all of that. So it wasn't something where I was like, oh, like I knew I had that in me because it was on the volley. It was instinct. Did I mean to volley? Yes, I did. But it was just, there was no thought process. The ball was in the right position and it was just instinct to swivel and hit it, you know, and some it going in and I say like a ridiculous goal that was unbelievable. But then Yossi Benayoun comes up with a chip and takes a bit of the shine off of it, because Yossi's goal I think was better than mine.
Do you?
Yeah, I do. I really do. The way that he chops and twists and turns, and whilst doing that, have the nous to look up and know that the keeper's off his line, and you've got to remember, if you look at the ball's under his feet, so for him to dig it out from under his feet, which is a hard skill, by the way, you know, and see where the ball dies, because a lot of people try to put a bit more on the ball when the ball's under your feet because they feel like they can't get a lot on it. But the way that he done it, for me, the technique and the thought process, and not just that, the audacity after twisting and turning, you know, for me, his goal's better.
How many times have you watched your goal back? Because I'll be honest, do you know on like social media you get this on this date X many years ago, whenever it's the anniversary of your goal, it's always there. It's always on West Ham social media. It's always there. So is Yossi's, but you just know that date, that year, you're going to get to see a few replays of Anton's goal. And so I can confirm I watch it at least once a year for a few times. But how many times have you watched? Do you watch it back? Think, bloody hell, that was good. I've done well there.
Like you, I watch it back when it pops up on my social media. You know, my son watches it more than me, which is nice. You know, my daughter, I've got a young son who's only 8 months at the moment, but I'm sure when he gets to an age where he's talking and understanding things, it'll become more of a regular theme in the house, and it'll be all over the TV, you know, and all over their iPads. But it's something where I can look back at it and go, wow, like, I actually done that.
Right, and another goal that was a match-winning game as well was against Man United and beating Rio. I mean, this must have been a personal, massive, maybe statement's the wrong word, occasion, I suppose. Feels a bit underwhelming, though. It's somewhere in between. Do you know what I'm badly trying to say here?
Yeah, I do. It was an unbelievable feeling. It was one, scoring against your brother, scoring against Manchester United, scoring at Upton Park down the Trevor Brooking end. No, it wasn't Trevor Brooking, it was Bobby Moore end. Down at the Bobby Moore end, you know, it don't get better than that. You know, as a West Ham fan, scoring the Bobby Moore end at Upton Park under the lights against your brother, against Manchester United. I've just reeled off something that a lot of people can't say they've done. You know, and I sit here with pride knowing that I've done that, you know, and for me, obviously, within my family, having the bragging rights, you know, Rio never scored against me, but I scored against him. And the competitiveness of us two as brothers was there for everyone to see within my family. And what a lot of people don't know is that my brother never went up into the box after the game. He got straight on the coach and went back to Manchester and texted my mum and dad and said, I'll speak to you tomorrow. because, and the reason why, and he said it now, and the reason why is because he wouldn't have been able to walk into the box with all of our friends and family there and looked at me, because he knew I would have been absolutely rubbing it in his face. So he didn't want to see that. And yeah, it was an unbelievable feeling. I remember heading the ball going in the back of the net and I'm shouting, "Have that!" I was so amped and so buzzing, you know, and I remember I just went cold. I went cold and I was like, yes, have that. And it was an unbelievable feeling.
What was it like growing up with Rio as a brother then? Just talk me through as many stories as you want, many examples as you want, as many feelings as you want. Because, you know, you've spoken already in this video about the amount of pressure on you. I couldn't think of any more pressure than trying to follow in the footsteps of a brother who'd done it. But as you got older and more experienced, he was also at the same time winning trophies. So you'd make in the first team, but he's winning titles. You'd be like, right, I'm in the Premier League now, but he's going on and playing in the Champions League and stuff. So every time you progressed, he progressed as well. So I can't imagine the pressure that you had.
Yeah, it was. As I said, a lot of West Ham fans understand and know, because they watched me grow with it. You know, they watched me week in, week out. They compared me, you know, and so when they reflect, and when I do speak to a lot of fans, and that's one of the biggest questions that I get asked by West Ham fans is, how do you deal with that pressure? And as I said earlier, I had a shield which was put in place by my family and Rio, you know, my mum, dad, and my brother, that I was a good player in my own right, and I had to believe that and believe in myself. But there was never no. My brother always wanted me to do what he always wanted. He would never say it outwardly because of the way that he is and the way that he's competitive. But he wanted me to be better than him. I wanted him to do well. I wanted him to keep doing better. I wanted him to keep becoming the best. There was never no jealousy between us. Not on my part, not on his part. You know, the fact that I was able to live out my dream. You know, he was proud of me as his brother, that I was able to do that. You know, and be in the position that I was in, the position that I was in terms of him being his brother, and the pressure I was under. I think he now that he's got kids and he's seeing some of the pressure that they're under, now starting to understand what it was like for me. But there was never no jealousy. We both wanted each other to do well. We both wanted each other to be the best we could possibly be. It just so happened that he went on to be the best, one of the best, and if not the best in the world for a long period of time, and I didn't.
Whenever I hear you two speak, it's more like listening to best friends rather than brothers, if that makes sense. The relationship between the two of you, and you see, this is an extreme example, but you see the Gallagher brothers at the minute, and they don't have that sort of bond between them that you and Rio had, and it's quite heartwarming to see, I suppose, that the person putting you under pressure is also your biggest fan and the person shielding you from the biggest pressure. So it's almost like the culprit, but also the person that's benefiting you as well. But there's a really nice story that that Rio told, but I guess you kind of told it as well. I'm going to ask you to say it because I think people watching this would really like it. When you were younger and Rio turned into Peter Schmeichel.
Yeah. Well, when we was young and I was like a toddler running about and stuff, he'd put me in goal in the flat in front of the sofa. The sofa was the goal, and he'd smash balls at me, and I'd be the goalkeeper. Well, try to be the goalkeeper, but yeah, he'd smash balls at me, he'd hurt me and stuff like that. But then as we got older, and when I turned like 8, 9, we'd be outside, and I'd always play 1v1 with my friend Osman, you know, who was a good player. He was a striker and a finisher, a young Turkish boy named Osman. And Rio would go in goal, and he would play, and me and Osman would play 1v1. And I'd be winning 2-0. Then all of a sudden, Rio would let 4 goals in of Osman's, and then he would start saving everything that I'm shooting at him. And it would be so blatant that he would be favouring Osman over me, and I used to get upset. I used to cry, "Why are you doing this for, Rio? Like, why are you saving my shots, but you're not saving Osman's?" They used to say to me, "Shut up. What are you going to do? Are you going to fold, or are you going to work harder? What are you going to do? Shut up. You're a baby." As a kid, you just think your big brother's unfair. But it grounded me and put stuff in me that I needed throughout my career, my career, not just my career, but throughout my life. You know, that when the going gets tough, you work harder. You know, and he helped nurture that in me as a kid. And it's only when you get older you understand and realise that. And I think that's why because he knew me so well based on what he'd done with me as a kid, being my bigger brother, he knew things I could deal with and he knew things that I couldn't deal with. And he was there to be my shield when he needed to be, and he was there to allow me to get hurt when I needed to get hurt, or to have pressure when I needed to have pressure.
Anyway, your first season in the Premier League, made it to the FA Cup final. I mean, talk about a dream debut season. You're in the Premier League, you're playing games at centre-back, you're playing well in the Premier League, get to the Millennium Stadium, FA Cup final. Talk me through that day, though.
It can't even start with the day. It's got to start with the week, 10 days before it, when, as a young Englishman, you know about the FA Cup, you know about the history of the FA Cup, and you know how big it is. But until you're in that situation where for 10 days before it's a week before it's a press media day, every day, and you're doing ESPN America, ESPN Australia, ESPN Middle East. You know, you're doing, all of a sudden you've gone from doing nationals in the UK to now, all of a sudden you're doing interviews worldwide for worldwide broadcasters. Then you really understand this game's much bigger than what we actually think. Yes, we know it's big because of the heritage within the UK, but it's big worldwide. You know, and we're talking like billions of people watching it now, not millions, there's billions watching it. And then you get to the game and it's like, wow, man, this is everything that you dreamed of, everything that you've worked hard for comes down to this one moment. You're playing an FA Cup final, your family are here, your friends are here, the fans are here to watch you. You've got to put in a good performance. You've got to play well. There's a lot of pressure. And it's just an unbelievable thing. And I sit here proud today to be able to say, because there's a lot of good players who have played in the Premier League who can never say they've played in an FA Cup final. I can. You know, it would have been even better if we would have won it, of course. You know, and that's probably one of the biggest things that hurts me today is not winning that game, you know, and being so close to winning it, but not winning it, and then obviously being the one that missed a penalty, which, as I've said many, many a time, it still to this day is something that haunts me. It's something that, you know, it wakes me up at times, and it's something that really, really hurt deep down.
Did it hurt you more as a West Ham fan? Obviously, I don't want to disregard your teammates' feelings and stuff like that, because obviously it's going to upset them losing the FA Cup final, but did it almost hurt you twice? Did it hurt you in the sense that as a player, I've missed out on winning the FA Cup, but as a West Ham fan, I've missed out on winning the FA Cup as a West Ham fan? Yeah,
massively. It was both. Being a West Ham player and a West Ham fan, I think it hurt twice. You know, I just wanted the ground to swallow me up and take me elsewhere. I didn't want to be on the pitch. It was something that, as I said, the hurt was something that was unexplainable, and it ended up being the worst summer of my footballing life, you know. But not just that, it was a case of, obviously, I understand and know that the boys who won the FA Cup before me, they looked upon as legends, you know, and I could have been in that bracket. As a West Ham fan, I could have been in that bracket, you know. I know West Ham fans see me as a, and it's hard for me to say it, as a West Ham legend, but I think because I didn't win that FA Cup, it's hard for me to fathom it. It's hard for me to to understand why. I'm appreciative of it, of course, being a West Ham fan, and I love being called a West Ham legend. I absolutely love it. And I love my kids hearing people say that. But I just understand and know that the boys who won it before me, the way they're spoken about, I would have loved to have been spoken about in the same ilk, and not winning the FA Cup. If we would have won the FA Cup, that's how it would have been.
In the lead up to that game, did you practice penalties at all? Were you meant to be the fifth penalty taker? Because you've spoken previously about how Alan Pardew was so attention to detail and whatnot. So one would assume that the penalties was something that would have been planned, and sort of analysis on the Liverpool keeper would have been done to a T and whatnot. Were you supposed to be the fifth man?
No, I wasn't. I wasn't one of the five going into the game. But on the day, Alan Pardew asked who wants penalties, and people put their hands up, and there was no number 5. There was 4 that all said yes, and there might have been 3 that said yes, or 4, and then there was no number 5, and Alan Pardew was like, well, who wants to take a penalty? And I was happy to take that pressure and take that responsibility on my shoulders. You know, if no one else wants it, that's I'll have it. I'm there. I'll take it, no problem. And that's how it went. And you know, I'm not a penalty taker, but as I've said earlier, if I'm gonna die, I like to fall on my own sword and not anybody else's. And I felt it was the right thing to do, not just as a West Ham player, but as a West Ham fan. How am I not putting myself forward if other people don't want to put themselves forward? You know, how am I not doing that? You know, and I like to look at myself as a leader. So I led, and I said, yes, I'll have it.
And you missed it. That Nokia ringtone, that bloody Nokia ringtone. Yeah. I blame the Nokia ringtone.
Anytime I hear a Nokia ringtone, the phone gets thrown.
PTSD.
Oh, it's unreal.
I mean, if that wasn't worse, right? You then get an England call up for the World Cup, but you can't go.
Yeah, and that's why it ended up being the worst summer of my footballing life. To actually go and miss the penalty, the jubilation of getting to the FA Cup and playing the FA Cup, and then missing the penalty that lost us the FA Cup when we were seconds away from winning it. And then I played the last 3 months of the season with a hernia. So at times I was in the morning, it was taking me half hour, 40 minutes to get out of bed because my hernias were hurting so much. And that happened to me the morning of the game of the FA Cup final. But then the 30-man squad got announced just before the FA Cup final, and I wasn't in the 30-man squad. So because I wasn't in the 30-man squad, West Ham had booked me in to have a hernia operation to make sure I was fit for pre-season. So I could do it straight away after the game, so I could have a holiday and then go straight back into pre-season. So I had that done. And then I think Luke Young got injured. He was part of the 30-man squad and he got injured. And Sven-Goran Eriksson rang my phone and just said, I would like you to come and meet up with the squad as we've had someone pull out. And I was like, I've just had an operation on a hernia. But I might be able to get back. I might be able to get fit in a week, 10 days, because it's only a hernia and I should be running within 10 days to 2 weeks, or a week to 10 days. And he went, okay, well, and this showed me how much he actually wanted me to come and meet up with the squad. Is that he said, okay, no problem. What we'll do is I'll get the doctors and the physio at West Ham, England, to speak with West Ham, you know. And I had already spoken to Jez, the doctor at West Ham, and the physio, and said, listen, you're going to get a phone call. Can you play it like I can get back, please? And I'm going to try and do everything I can to get back. And he was like, yeah, of course, no problem. But sadly, it never happened. I couldn't get moving free enough to be able to go meet up with the England squad, and I remember him ringing me about a week later and saying, Anton, obviously it's bad news. I've got to name the squad in the next week, and you're not ready to come in, so I'm gonna have to look for somebody else. And I still remember it to this day. I put the phone down and absolutely cried my eyes out. It was something that hurt deeply, and the reason why it did is because it would have. Need to know how to put this. It's the reason why it hurt so much for me is because there's one thing when my granddad was alive, my mum, my dad they wanted to see me and Rio play for England together. And Rio had achieved it, and it was down to me to make that dream come true. And that never happened and it's because of me. Obviously, I didn't fulfill my potential in the end. I wasn't consistent enough, but the way that played out, and listen, it's no fault of my own, and obviously you can't help injuries, you can't help having operations, but I think if I would have got that call up and I wouldn't have had that operation, I would have been in the 30-man squad from the start, and I don't think I would have looked back. I would have came back to pre-season, the next pre-season. I would have been bubbly. I would have been energetic. I would have had my confidence would have been sky high, and I would have went from strength to strength, I think. And it just wasn't meant to be. And as I said, that ended up being the worst summer of my footballing life.
How did you come back to pre-season then?
I come back drunk. I come back drunk. I come back partied out. It was a hard summer. I went to the World Cup. I went and watched Rio in the World Cup, and yeah, it hurt. It hurt me a great deal. But again, that's my story, and that's how it was meant to be. And all the things that have happened to me throughout my career, through life and through my career, has made me who I am today.
It's tough to hear, though. I'm not just saying that. It's tough to hear. You speak about your growth spurt earlier, where you get a bit of a knock and you come out of it on the other side in a positive manner. And this one, you get a bit of a knock and you come out of it on the other side, unfortunately. And it just reminds you, as a human being, listening to people like yourself speak, that footballers are A, human, and B, just how quick and how small a footballer's career can change, really. One small thing can have a huge sacrifice and a huge implication on their entire career. Marlon Harewood was also on the verge of the England squad as well and didn't get in because of injury and stuff like that. I mean, where did it go wrong the next season then for West Ham up until Pardew essentially got sacked? Because, I mean, I, as a fan, I was buzzing that summer. We lost the final, but I was like, hello, we've got this young squad that playing a really attacking football. Let me sign Tevez and Mascherano. And we're like, hello, this is the possibilities for West Ham for this season coming up is ridiculously high. And I was just a kid at the time. And the football fan in you does take over, where your optimism does go sky high just because you're a fan. But things were looking really good for West Ham at this point, and ended up with Pardew getting sacked. I mean, what went wrong for us that season?
Well, firstly, our pre-season was, and I'm sure other players have spoken about this, like Jimmy Walker, James Collins, and so on. Marlon Harewood, another one, has probably spoken about this. Our pre-season that summer, after coming back from losing the FA Cup, was in Sweden at a beer festival. We were surrounded by a beer festival in Sweden. So our pre-season wasn't great. And when I mentor now to a lot of young players. And I always say the first season is the easy one. The second season is always the hardest, because now people know what they're up against. People respect you a lot more. And it's always harder. And I think an accumulation of things that happened throughout that through pre-season and the start of that season was the reason why we started so poorly, you know, and that's how the season went, and it ended up being personally a bad season as a West Ham player and as a West Ham fan, you know. But as we know, we never do things the easy way. We always do things the hard way, and it's always been that way, you know. So to play the majority of the season so shit the way that we did, and especially off the back of how we played the season before, you know, with no fear and didn't care who we came up against, to now getting rolled over by teams that had just come up and teams that we were beating comfortably the year before. You know, for me as a West Ham fan, it really, really hurt me. And I've voiced my frustration a lot of the time within the dressing room. But there was this one particular time where I voiced my opinion and I didn't stop. I was ranting for about 15, 20 minutes, and that was away at Charlton when we'd lost 4-0. And that was when obviously Alan Pardew had left to go Charlton, and Alan Curbishley had come in at West Ham. And I remember it clearly. We lost the game 4-0. A few of the goals were my fault. I'd actually had a terrible game personally. And then we got into the dressing room, and I remember Alan Curbishley saying, "Oh, you got to do better next week." And I was like, "Pardon? Like, you got to do better next week?" Like, that's what we've heard. That's what I've heard from you since you come in. When we lost game, we got to do better next week. I said, "Like, are you taking a mick? Like, if people ain't doing what they're supposed to be doing, then fucking let them know then. Don't just say we got to do better next week. I don't want to hear that." And he went, "Anton, you got to do better next week." I said, "Then fucking tell me then. Let me know. Tell me." And I just turned to the boys and I said, "Listen, if you can't take a hammering off the gaffer, you shouldn't even fucking be in here. You shouldn't be in this dressing room. Because if you can't take a hammering off the manager, you can't play in front of them fans out there. Because they expect better from us. And we should expect better from us." You know, and I was ranting for about, as I said, 10, 15, 20 minutes. And then after that, and I'm not saying it's because of me, I'm not saying it's because of that rant, but something changed after that. You know, and we started to win games. We started to do things properly. We started to train a lot harder. The captain at the time, Lucas Neal, he called a meeting with just the players, no managerial staff, just the players, and laid down the law after that game at Charlton, you know, and reiterated a lot of things that I said, that we know what we got to do. We know we've got quality in this room. You know, but what we've got to do is work hard in every team we play against. If we do that, then the results will take care of themselves. And if you're not willing to do that, I suggest you piss off and come out of the room now. And that was the start of change, you know, and it put us in a position where we got to the last home game, which was against Bolton, and we beat them comfortably, which then took us into the last game at Old Trafford, where Tevez come up trumps and cement himself in folklore, cement himself in West Ham history and as a West Ham legend.
I mean, that must have been some day for you, though, as a West Ham fan, to what they call it, the great escape, don't they? But I mean, do you take part in that? I know it's a bit weird to sort of celebrate avoiding failure, but as you'll understand if you're a West Ham fan, won't you, that is something to celebrate to some extent. And, you know, it sounds even worse saying it to you when your brother's on the other team and they had an FA Cup final the following week, didn't they? Because there was debate over which team Man U were going to put out. They'd already wrapped up the title. They had the FA Cup to worry about and stuff. But so celebrating avoiding failure is a strange thing to do. But that must have been some day for you as a West Ham fan, staying in the Premier League as well and remaining a Premier League centre-back.
Yeah, 100%. Obviously, I'd been involved in the season that we went down when the best West Ham team, or the greatest team to ever go down, is still spoken about today. So I was in and around the first team around that time. And not just that, for me personally, I saw what it done to the football club. I saw people lose jobs that I'd worked with worked with me since I was 9 years old. I saw, you know, cleaners lose jobs. I saw the actual effect that it had to the soul of the club, to the people who worked within the club with a love, who were part of the furniture. I had seen that, and obviously had seen the hurt within the fans. So going into that game, I took a lot of that in there with me. Is that okay? We need to stay in this football club because the cleaners, the cooks, they need this job. You know, they need their job. And if we go down, the likelihood they're the first people that are going to go. And that didn't sit well with me. And you know, it's only when you're in a position you start to think about it. You start to think deeper, you know, and there was things that happened in that season and happened in that run-in that I took elsewhere when I went to other clubs that we was in relegation battles. Like in a perfect example, Lucas Neal, the captain, he had said to us, from now on, every time we win a game, you have to bring a certain amount of money in from your win bonus in cash. And he had collected all of it. And at the end of the season, he had shared it out to the people that worked with us day in, day out, the cleaners, the kitmen, the groundsmen who weren't on bonuses if we stayed up. But I asked him, like, that's fine. I've got no problem giving out the money. But what is it for? Why are you doing it? I was inquisitive. I was like, why are you doing it? He went, because if we're seen to be not if we're seen, but if we're going to give these people in on bonuses, if we give them part of our bonus, do you not think the pitches are going to be pristine? Do you not think that the kit is going to be done properly? Do you not think that the changing room is going to be done properly? Do you not think everything that we need to go and be the best version of ourselves, everything's going to be done properly? And not just that, it makes them feel close to us. It makes it feel more like a family vibe. And essentially that togetherness, not just from the players, but from the staff that I'd mentioned, that togetherness is really what drove us to go to Manchester United, to go to Old Trafford in the last day of the season and pull out one of the greatest escapes, because people do say we was in the bottom three around Christmas and January, and the teams that are in the bottom three around that time never come out of it. And we was the first team really to be in the bottom three come January, February and escape. So we went down in history.
I like that Lucas Neal story, sort of changing the culture around the club. I mean, Curbishley had a bit of an issue with the culture when he first arrived, didn't he? What did he refer to you lot as, the baby Bentley boys or something like that? I mean, how do you react as a player? Do you say, yeah, fair enough, that is my lifestyle, that is my car, I don't have an issue with it? So, or do you take it as a bit of an offence, actually? Do you take it as a bit of a swipe at you?
No, I think if he said that today, there'll be an issue. No, I didn't look at it as an issue. That's what he wanted to say. I think he could have kept it in house. And I think that people that know me know that I'm not flash. People that know me, yeah, I had a nice car, but I'd worked hard for it, you know. But people that know me, the people that matter, they know that I'm not flash. They know I'm not arrogant. Do I enjoy nice things like everybody else? Yes, I do. And why shouldn't I if I've worked hard for it? You know, but I think it's something that could have been kept in house, but it wasn't. You know, and essentially that created a narrative about me that wasn't true. You know, people thought I was flash. People thought that I was big-headed. You know, and I still today hear people come up to me and go, "Oh, you're not what I thought you would be." You know, and I believe that a lot of it is based off of that whole Bentley boy, the Bentley boy crew, the baby Bentley crew is based off of that narrative. You know, but as you say, as I said earlier, there's no offence taken from it for me. And it's made me the person I am today, and I sit here proud, and I stand firm on and believe that everything I went through it for a reason. you know, and that is for me to be able to do what I'm doing now, which is mentoring to the younger generation and making sure that they don't make the mistakes that I made.
What do you make of Curbishley as a manager overall?
Oh, that's a hard question for me. It's not hard, but he wasn't my favourite manager, I must say. And I think that's because I don't think he got the time to know me as a person. You know, he had his reservations. I think what he didn't like, for someone so young to have such a big voice within the dressing room, I don't think he liked. I think it was more old school. If you're young, you shouldn't really be talking. And I don't think he liked the fact that I was outspoken. But again, that's how I was brought up, was to speak. And the West Ham fan in me, especially when playing for West Ham, the West Ham fan in me wouldn't allow me to be quiet. If people weren't working hard, if I weren't working hard, then I demanded more. You know, I demanded more. I wanted the best. And if people weren't giving me that, I let them know. And I didn't care who it was, because at the end of the day, we're here to represent West Ham United, first and foremost. You know, there's that saying, if you represent the badge on the front, people remember the name on the back. And as a West Ham fan, I always wore my heart on my sleeve when I played, and I made that known when playing for West Ham United, or if things weren't going well in the dressing room, I made it known.
He also fined you 6 weeks' wages.
Yeah, he did.
Give us the story. Yeah, give us the story.
Yeah, so with the previous manager, Alan Pardew, when we had weekends off, we was allowed to go on holiday. We was allowed to go wherever we wanted. There was no stipulations. There was no curfews, nothing. And I saw weekends that we had free. I think it was out of the FA Cup. We had a weekend free, and it was around my birthday. My 21st birthday was around. So I booked for me and a few of my mates to go to America, because one of my pals went to university in America in South Carolina, and I had booked to go there for the weekend. I was going on the Thursday, because we had Friday, Saturday, Sunday off. I was going on the Thursday after training, because there used to be a night flight from Stansted to New York. And I was going on that flight on the Thursday evening. And on that Wednesday, I'd seen a piece of paper that was floating. It weren't on the board, it was floating about the dressing room, and it said on there, no players allowed to go outside Europe. I was like, what? And I'd already booked to go, and I was like, right, I've already booked, I'm going. And so I went, had an unbelievable time. I came back, and then the following week we played Charlton, and that's when we lost 4-0 to Charlton. And in the following week we played Tottenham at home, and the press had got hold of that I'd gone to America, you know, and people were asking me where did you go away? Like, the press officer was asking, where did you go away? And I just said I went to the Isle of Wight. I said I went to the Isle of Wight to see my nan and granddad, and that was it. I just left it at that. I went to see my nan and granddad in the Isle of Wight, and that was it. And then the News of the World got hold of the story, and it was the day before we played Tottenham. We played Tottenham on the Sunday, so when the News of the World comes out, and the press officer had spoken to the reporter, and had said to the reporter that Anton just went to Isle of Wight to see his nan and granddad. Where the sick nan and granddad came from, I couldn't tell you. I don't know. But it was written that Anton lied and went to these sick nan to see his sick nan and granddad, which I never said. And I wouldn't say that, because, you know, you just don't say that type of stuff. But it was the day before the game that the club was identified, and they were alerted that it was coming out on a Sunday. So she had to go and tell the manager, and the manager called me in, and Curbishley called me in, and he sat me down. He went, obviously there's rumours that there's a story coming out tomorrow that you went to America. Like, firstly, is it true? And I just said, well, Gaff, I'm not going to lie to you. Yeah, I went. And I explained to him that I'd always gone there in previous years, and that piece of paper I saw, it was floating around the dressing room. It weren't on the board. So in my eyes, I thought I could go. And he just went to me, listen, I'll tell you what, Anton, we're playing Tottenham tomorrow. He went, if we win the game tomorrow, I'll say that I'll let you go. If we lose it, it's all on you, son. And I was like, okay, cool, no problem. And I went to walk out. And as I went to walk out, he went, as I put my hand on the door to walk out, he went, oh, by the way, that'll be 6 weeks' wages, fine. And I just said, okay, cool. And I walked out, you know. I didn't argue because I'd done wrong, you know, and I hold my hands up that I'd done wrong. But again, when you sit and reflect and you get older, as a manager, you want to get the best out of your player. You don't say, if you win it, I'll protect you, but if we lose it, I'll throw you under the bus. You don't say that to a player, you know, and that's what he done. And for me, we didn't lose. We lost the game on the day, which made it worse for me, and probably one of the worst days in my West Ham career was hearing the fans boo me because of that story, and rightly so. You know, we was in a relegation battle. Why am I going away? Why am I going to America? Why am I going so far? And as I say, as I sit back and reflect as an older person, they was in their right mind to boo me because I wasn't giving my best self to the cause, because I was doing stuff that I shouldn't have been doing. But yeah, it hurt me to hear the West Ham fans booing me. It hurt me to hear some of them saying stuff that hurt me, that I won't repeat on here, to do with my nan and granddad. But just as I've said time and time again, stuff that I went through is the reason why I am who I am today, and why I do what I do today.
Anyway, a few months later, into August, really, you got sold to Sunderland quite late on in the month, reluctantly so. And in fairness to Curbishley, he didn't want you to go.
No, he didn't. I think he didn't like me as a person, but he knew I was a good player. So he didn't. And literally 2 weeks before I was sold, he had called me and Mark Noble into his office and was talking about building a team around me and Nobes. You know, which was fantastic. You know, and he then all of a sudden, I think Newcastle bid for me and was accepted, and I was like, no, I'm not going there. No chance of my going there, and so I knew Newcastle was a big club, but I wanted to stay at West Ham. And I was like, no, I'm not going there. And I was speaking to Gianluca Nani and saying, no, not a chance. Like, no, this is my club, I'm staying here. And then a week later, Sunderland bid for me, and they accepted the bid from Sunderland. And then the talk was different with this time to me. It was from Gianluca Nani and Eggert, the chairman at the time. It was, Anton, like, you need to go. Like, you have to go. And I was like, I'm not going anywhere. This is my football club. I ain't going nowhere. It's not happening. And then he went to me, yeah, but Roy Keane will be good for you. You got to go. Gianluca Nani was saying, Roy Keane will be good for you. He'll be fantastic. He'll take you to the next level. And I was like, well, you better bring Roy Keane here then, and bring him to West Ham and let him do that to me here at West Ham, because I'm not going anywhere. And then that was it. And then a few days later, I was summoned to the offices to speak, and it was wrong what they done to me, I think. For someone who was young, they pulled on my heartstrings in the sense of, like, the club could be finished if you don't go. We need this money. The club needs this money. This is your club, Anton, and the club needs this money. If we don't take this £8 million for you, the club could be finished. And I went away from it, and I looked at it and I was like, do I want to be remembered as the player who could have brought money into the club to help the club and save the club, or do I want to be known as someone who refused that and the club struggles, or the club is no longer, and because that's how it was put to me, you know, and I sit here now and I wish I just still would have said no, because hindsight is a beautiful thing, and an older head has a different viewpoint, you know, and I would have been strong and I would have went, no, I'm not going. But they pulled on my heartstrings, and I still was adamant that maybe I shouldn't go. But I went and saw Roy Keane and had a conversation with Roy Keane, and after speaking to Roy Keane, I felt more comfortable about going. And add that with the fact that I was going in my head on the basis of the club's going to be fine in terms of a financial situation. The club will be fine if I can go. If I go, then the club's going to be fine, and that's why I end up leaving. And to Alan Curbishley's surprise, he didn't know about it. You know, even when I was going out for my medical, I was told by Gianluca Nani and the chairman that if the manager rings, you don't pick up the phone. You know, and that's how it went. You know, and that's the one thing. I don't regret anything I've done in my career. I don't regret an absolute thing. I'm proud of the career that I've had. But if there's one thing, if I could do it all over again, is I would have stayed at West Ham for the whole entire time of my career. You know, and there's no better person than Mark Noble, who, when we moved to the Olympic Stadium, it really hit home for me. When we moved to the Olympic Stadium, and Mark Noble, as the captain, had his own lounge for his family, and rightly so and deservedly so. And the first time I went there, I walked in to eat. I spoke to him on the phone. I said, he said, come down to my lounge. And I went into his lounge, and he just went to me, this could have been yours, bruv. And it was like, what? And it's true, it could have been, you know, and that's when it really hit home. And like I said, I don't regret my career. I don't regret anything I've done in my career. But if there's one thing that, if I'd done it all over again, I would have been a one-man club, and I would have stayed at West Ham for the whole of my career.
Love that. Right, a couple of funnish questions to end on, Anton. Who's the best player you ever played with at West Ham?
Carlos Tevez.
That's, apart from him, that's a bit different. You don't have to get world-class players coming to the team.
Yossi Benayoun.
Yeah, okay. I had a feeling you'd be good for Yossi. Who's sort of the biggest character at the club when you were there?
You know what? It's either, all people always say either me or Bobby Zamora. So I have to say Bobby. Bobby.
Good man. I thought you were going to say Jimmy Walker. I thought
he gets a mention, but gets a mention. But yeah, Bobby. I'd say Bobby.
Right, at the very start, I asked you, who would you room with out of anybody? Last question, who would you not room with at West Ham on the away game?
Nigel Reo-Coker.
Why's that?
I love him dearly, like my brother, but he's just not a morning person. He used to get hammered in the morning because people knew he'd be moody.
So people knew he'd get moody, so he would get smashed.
He'd get more, yeah. He'd walk into the dressing room in the morning and he'd get hammered.
Fair enough.
Our dressing room was built on that. Our dressing room was built on banter.
You picked that up from the Pardew era anyway, that you get that vibe that the team cohesion was the best part about being at West Ham. You do get that vibe from you.
I don't know a player who played in that team who don't say it's the best team environment they've been in. Everyone says it. The fact that Carlos Tevez and Mascherano came, they couldn't speak English, and Carlos Tevez was out in the nightclub with us. You know, and people were double taking him. Where else do you get that? You know, and we done everything together. Whenever we went out, there was no less than 6 of us in the team going out. And as I said, it was built on a brotherhood. It was built on the likes of myself, Mark Noble, at the time, really, who were young players who came through the academy, where players that came from up north or came from abroad. What we done was made them understand as quick as possible what it took to play for West Ham United, what the fans expect from them, you know, and what it takes to play for the football club. And that's what our change room was built on.
You still get that with Carlos Tevez today. Tevez is still a West Ham fan. You know what I say. I use it lightly, but he still does hold West Ham dearly in his heart. And he was only there for a season in the first 6 months.
I don't know a player that don't. How many players did we have, especially in my team, that, so you got Marlon Harewood, James Collins, Jimmy Walker, Danny Gabidon, yeah, came from up north or came from another part of the UK, yeah. They came not knowing what they were walking into, and they all left West Ham fans. Tells you, once you're in the football club, it grabs you, it grips you, and it don't let you go.
Yeah, I'm actually thinking about it now, about the players that you see as ambassadors on match days over the London Stadium. Rufus Brevet as well, there's another player that's in there, and you've got the legends as well, but there's almost like a gap between the legends and then your team. There's almost a gap. Then from your team to today, there's not that many players either that's regularly involved with West Ham United over there, actually. So yeah, I think evidence before you presents itself to sort of to back up your claim there. Well, Anton, thank you very much. Genuinely a massive pleasure chatting to you about your time at West Ham. I know people that are watching this will still be watching it and thoroughly enjoying it. So Anton, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me on.
And if you guys at home have enjoyed this interview, please do drop a like on it by clicking the thumbs up button. Subscribe if you're new to Hammers Chat. I'll catch you in a bit.